Okay, so let's focus on the three main types of fossil fuels. And hopefully I can get through all three of these in this one video. All right, so the first one we're going to start off with is coal. Now, what we need to understand about coal is that coal is the dirtiest to burn. When coal gets burned, it produces a lot of ash, which is an air pollutant. It's so large, it's actually called a particulate matter. And when you inhale coal ash, it can actually cause pretty significant lung disease or lung damage. Okay, so we have pretty much these three right here. So these are our three main types of coal. Okay, now peat is very important because if peat did not exist, then the other three types would not exist. So all of these come from peat. They all start off as peat, but through time, they progress into these other three types of coal. So you can see that there is an increase in heat and carbon content, and you also will be decreasing the amount of moisture found in each type. Okay, so peat, yes, obviously we know that it is not a coal. It is, I want you guys to underline this, partially decayed plant matter. Now, coal is still very moist. We can actually just pull it out of the ground. And, you know, a lot of countries still dig it up out of the ground and use it as a fuel source. It's not great because it doesn't have a lot of energy, but you can burn it and get heat. So it's typically formed under wet and acidic conditions. Okay. All right. Now, heat, we know, coal. So these three other types of coal are produced over millions of years through increases in heat and pressure. So it starts off as peat, and then through heat and pressure in the earth, it becomes one of these other three types of coal. So the first one we're going to look at is lignite. Okay, lignite is not used. And the reason it's not used is because it has low heat content. We really can't do anything with it. It doesn't have a lot of carbon in it. It's not useful. So lignite, if it's determined to be lignite, it's typically thrown out. Okay. Now when we add more heat and pressure to lignite, it becomes bituminous. Bituminous is what we primarily use. So bituminous is extensively used because it has high heat content and there are large supplies. Okay. Now, the downside to bituminous is it has a high sulfur content. So what does that mean for us? Guess what? That means a lot of air pollution, y'all. Air pollution and acid rain. Sulfur is a big component of acid rain. Okay. We'll look more at that when we get to the air pollution unit. All right, so bituminous, when we add more heat and pressure, it becomes anthracite. Anthracite is what is most desired because it has the highest heat content, but supplies are limited. Supplies are limited, so we don't really use this one very much. Okay. All right. So what are the advantages and disadvantages to using coal? Well, right now, it's plentiful. We still have a few hundred years left of coal deposits on the planet. The disadvantages is it contains impurities. And pollutants. Remember, this is the dirtiest one to use. All right. Now, the next one we're going to look at is petroleum. So another term for petroleum is going to be oil. Okay. So if we look at this picture right here, and we're not going to go into a ton of detail on how it gets extracted and all that kind of stuff. You know that you do have to have a tap that's going to be able to penetrate through the different layers of rock to the oil reserve right here. Okay, here's the oil reserve right here. And as you can see, guys, natural gas sits on top of oil reserves. Okay. Now, sometimes there are pockets of natural gas isolated, but we'll talk about that here in a second. Okay, so oil has to be drilled. We've heard the term oil well, so it's drilled out of the earth. And oil right here has lots of different components to it. Oil has lots of impurities that must be removed during processing. What's happening? Oh, there we go. That must be removed during processing. Okay, now I told you guys that in the United States, oil is, the number one use for oil is transportation. Okay, so in the U.S., we use this for transportation. But we can actually take oil and turn it into different types of fuel. So that's what this barrel is right here. So this is a barrel of oil. Okay. Now, like I said, most of it is used to produce gasoline for transportation. We also get diesel fuel from oil. We get jet fuel. And then there's other different types of fuel that I don't know a lot about to be able to explain to you what they are. Just know that a lot of it is used for transportation, obviously, by looking at diesel, jet, gasoline. Okay. All right. The advantages of using oil is it is energy dense, meaning it has a lot of energy. Okay. Disadvantages, oil spills. We've seen lots of examples of these in history, the devastation that happens because of these. But we'll go into more detail with oil spills when we get to our water pollution unit. Okay? All right. So let's go to the next page. Here we have natural gas. Okay. Now, natural gas is, if you remember the picture I just pointed out to you, it sits basically on top of an oil reserve for the most part. Now, we do have pockets of it that are also extracted as well. And they're extracted through the process called fracking. Guys, we have fracking all over the place in Texas. And there are several locations in Arlington that are currently fracking. It's basically those places, I call them dinosaur pits, because it looks like, you know, they're trying to hide velociraptors behind. It's like the high fence with the cloth on it you can't see through, but you can see these tall pumps. That's a fracking location. Okay, so the specific term for fracking is actually called hydrologic fracturing. Okay, hydrologic fracturing. So basically this is what happens. Water is pumped underground to release natural gas. Okay, so let's look at the picture right here, guys. There's a lot of controversy about fracking too, as you'll see here in a second. So there is a drill. It shoots a stream of water with, it says, quartz, sand, and chemicals into the earth. Okay. This extreme pressure causes cracks to form. So right here, artificial cracks are formed underground. Does that really sound safe? So these cracks form underground, and it causes the natural gas, okay, the natural gas to go up. Okay. When the natural gas flows up, it gets collected. Sounds pretty simple, right? But we also know that there are lots of side effects to fracking. One is we've seen a massive increase in the frequency of earthquakes. Yes, we do have earthquakes in Texas. You may not feel them, but they happen. And it's because of fracking. We've seen an increase in the number of earthquakes because of fracking. So fracking, because you're causing, fractures in the ground. Fracking causes an increase in earthquakes, and it can lead to groundwater contamination. You want natural gas in your water? Well, I just spelled this wrong though. Let's fix this so that we know how to spell contamination correctly. Okay. Okay. So groundwater. There we go. I promise I know how to spell groundwater contamination. All right. What are the advantages? Well, it's cleaner to burn. The disadvantages is methane is a greenhouse gas. Remember methane from the carbon cycle, y'all? So natural gas, right here, natural gas, this is methane. We are collecting methane, okay? So methane is also flammable, we know that. Okay, now there are some other types of fossil fuels that we don't really talk about very much. It's because the supplies are limited. They're not found very frequently. But the number one type that we see is what's called the tar sands. This is in Canada, or they're called oil sands right here. These are all in Canada. It's basically a type of oil that sits on top of sand. Okay, that's really the only way to explain it. You have to retrieve it through strip mining. Remember the pictures when we talked about strip mining where you have to peel away layer after layer of the earth? Now it does produce gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. But the problem is there's just not a lot of it to begin with. And once it's gone, it's gone. So this is not an extremely reliable source of energy. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to talk about our last type of non-renewable energy.